What up, is Marcus with Dynasty with Dads. We are going to be going through some of my 2022 recap. These are predictions made previous to the season, so you get an idea of what kind of content you are getting if you are a new subscriber, or just kind of revisit some of the players that I've truly liked before the season to kind of get a gauge of like, does he actually know anything like he's saying? Or, hey, what's the grade on the season? So give me a grade on what you think I did this year in some of these picks here. If you're new to the channel, we still have the Deontay Smith signed jersey. Those subscribers are moving on in the winter here. So maybe we'll hit 2K here pretty soon. We're going to start off with my worst one. The worst, I would say my biggest miss on the year. And it was my most overrated running back. My most overrated running back was Tony Pollard. Now, he finished 8th overall in PPR, 8th overall in standard. And honestly, he just looked better than Zeke. And when I was looking at him compared to Zeke, Zeke, I still thought they were going to give him the lion's share of the ball. And I thought that Tony Pollard was going to be kind of stuck into this low-end RB2 phase. Very similar to like an A.J. Dillon role to an Aaron Jones role. But that wasn't the case. Tony Pollard has shown to be a very capable running back. It's going to be very interesting because everyone always thinks that Tony Pollard is this 23-year-old running back, 24-year-old running back like Alexander Madison. But he's 26, I think almost 27 years old, if I remember right. So he'll be 27 going into next season, if I can think about that properly. So he's an older backup running back, so I don't know where he's going to land or where he's going to go and what he's going to end up producing. It's going to be very interesting to see who ends up pulling the bag out of money, or I don't know if I said that right. The bag of money out? Yeah, that's what I meant. The next two were the video that contained the most overrated running backs. There was 3 of them. And man, oh man, did I nail one, and then one was like, I would say I successfully completed that. So Tony Pollard was the first running back. Antonio Gibson was the second running back, 35th overall in standard, 27th in PPR. I think I had that right, or maybe it's flip-flop, but whatever. He was a running back 3, and he had one game over 60 yards rushing. Just not a good fantasy running back. I think the writing was on the wall when we saw Brian Robinson be drafted there into the 3rd round. And Washington's team, I just thought was going to be a poor offense. Everyone was talking about Carson Wentz going there, and it was going to be potentially a better offense. And just like when Matt Ryan went to the Colts, I was like, you were talking about just these switching of these ugly quarterbacks with like Baker and Sam Darnold and Carson Wentz, and unfortunately Matt Ryan is in that category, and Nick Foles, and like you have all these quarterbacks that just kind of suck, and so that team is just not going to be scoring a bunch of points. I think Antonio Gibson's touchdowns are going to go down, and so I thought RB3. And then the last one was Chase Edmonds, and Chase Edmonds, I remember getting a little bit of flack on this, saying, hey, Chase Edmonds, he's the guy, he's the starter in Miami. Well, 57th and 60, he had 400 total yards, and he ended up at Denver. And in fact, I was watching a Broncos game, and I was like, who the heck is that? Is that a wide receiver? And I was like, oh, it's Chase Edmonds. He's just wearing, I think, 19 it was. So, again, I think I nailed one. I would pretty much say Antonio Gibson's another nail, and then Tony Pollard is one of the biggest misses that I've had. Then, of course, my most underrated running back kind of went with my most overrated running back, which was Zeke. I thought Zeke was going to be another top 24 running back. He was 17th or 22nd, depending on your league scoring, which isn't amazing, though. I wanted a low-end RB1 specifically, and so he missed out on that mark. And so Zeke still becomes this touchdown heavy running back that's going to get you through some games, and he's okay. He's a middling running back RB2. We're gonna have a lot of discussions with him, Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry, Austin Eckler, CMC. There's a lot of running backs, Kamara, of running backs that are starting to get to the point where it's like the cliff is near, or you are already starting to go on the downslope of this cliff. And who are some of these young running backs? Where they're going to go? Did they draft a running back in Minnesota, in Dallas, in New Orleans? So I think there's going to be some big conversations to be had before the 2023 season. My most underrated wide receiver, this is my biggest hit of the year. And I want to say it's my biggest hit because I drafted him everywhere. I traded for him in so many different leagues, including the Dynasty Dad League, which won me the title. Woo, I am the champ. Thank you for the other 11 who participated. I don't know if I've even mentioned that I won the Dynasty Dad League from the listeners and viewers. So I didn't have necessarily the best team. I would give that to the Detroit Brown Bag my head, but I'm sorry. I am the champ. And so I didn't even think I got to the most underrated wide receiver. It was Devonte Smith. And my bold statement was he was going to blow out the rest of the rookies. He was going to outscore Drake London and Treylon Burks and Garrett Wilson. And so Devonte Smith had the last 5 games, 102, 64, 126, 113, 115, and 67, I think I wrote. He was 10th overall or 9th overall, depending on your scoring format. But that is a wide receiver 1. And I said that I thought the chase in Devonte Smith was an argument to be had at rookie draft time. Then you look at a year later and you go, wow, you have Jamar Chase being the number 1, number 2 wide receiver being drafted off the board. You have Devonte Smith being just smushed down these boards because A.J. Brown comes to town. And I was like, that doesn't make sense. I'm going to take the talent. I know that Jalen Hurts is maybe not the greatest passer, but Devonte Smith gets open, and if he can somehow get the ball to him, if he gets enough targets, he will. I mean, he didn't even have he had a great rookie year, kind of under the radar. He had 900 plus yards under the radar, and I just was like, Devonte Smith is my man. So we're going to be trying to find out some of these rookies, who's going to make the big second-year jump. Is it going to be a Drake London? Is it going to be a Treylon Burks? Is it going to be Garrett Wilson? I mean, Garrett Wilson, honestly, could follow the same suit, depending on what the Jets do at quarterback. Or he could be sucked into this crappy situation where it ends up being a Terry McLaurin, ends up being DJ Moore situation. So we'll keep an eye on tabs on it, but Garrett Wilson could be the next one that makes the jump because he is that kind of talented when it comes to the Devonte Smith type of role. And Devonte Smith has just said, hey, BMI doesn't matter. I'm a separator. I'm a great route runner and good hands. He's a great player. And so that's why I had him as my most underrated wide receiver. Not top 24. I'm going to give myself a win, but just a little like future, like, hey, I'm not saying that this is going to happen in 2023, but not a top 24 running back. I had Cam Akers. He was 35th, so he was outside the top 24. That was my bold statement. One of my bold statements. Because prior to the season, it was like there was Darrell Henderson and there was nothing else. And so a lot of people were on the Cam Akers train. But his last 3 games, 118, 123, 104. Something to note that if the Rams don't draft a running back, and if this is Cam Akers' backfield, Cam Akers could be one of the biggest buy low candidates for the 2023 season. So that's something to definitely to note for future here, guys. And so if you erase the last 3 weeks because you weren't in fantasy playoffs or dynasty playoffs or you were a rebuilding team, you probably didn't even know that Cam Akers was doing this good because he's on a bad team. And this is where you see the last 3 games put in, and all of a sudden you buy him, and then all of a sudden he starts off the year, and maybe he has a really good couple games. You go, hey, look at last year, look at the beginning of this year, and you can either sell him or you just try to ride him. And you can get him for a lower. I mean, he could be one of the biggest buy low candidates right now. And I've been a Cam Akers hater, but I mean, honestly, they have nothing else in the Rams. You know, they don't have anybody else. I mean, it definitely could be a situation to definitely put a huge monitor on. Most overrated wide receiver, another big hit here, Deontay Johnson. He was a wide receiver 1 the previous year, but he was 46 and 30, 886 and 0. And I said George Pickens was going to be the problem, and I said Kenny Pickett is going to be the problem. And something to note is when you start going through the analytical profile and you start seeing all these patterns of rookie quarterbacks not producing fantasy wide receivers, you start getting the hint of, oh, so that means Kenny Pickett, anybody that's a Pittsburgh Steeler, anybody that, even if it's Desmond Ridder, even if it is, why can't I think of his name? Malik Willis. They end up being failed projects so far. Let's look into, okay, well, if Houston drafts a top 2 wide receiver, if Houston drafts a quarterback, any of the weapons around Houston, even if you're a Nico Collins fan, or if they draft a rookie wide receiver, you're not going to be super thrilled about that because rookie quarterbacks don't produce top-end rookie wide receiver, or not even just wide receivers in general. And so this has been a big pattern here. So if you're trying to look for 1 to 2 year patterns, Deontay Johnson was the biggest sell here. And that's because Kenny Pickett and Trubisky, I wasn't a full believer in. And they even they end up trading Claypool away to give you more opportunity for targets. He got enough targets. But when you're in an offense that just doesn't produce well, I want to see what this does for running backs too. I mean, Najee Harris had a decent half to his back end of the year, but the beginning half was horrible. And so I haven't looked at running back specifically with rookie quarterbacks, but that might be something to also look into for the future that maybe we'll have to do some analytics. So I know we're almost at 10 minutes here. We're going to rattle off a couple other players that I did like and did dislike, I guess you could say, or I thought were a little bit overrated for the 2022 season. Cole Kmet. I honestly didn't realize he finished tight end 7 overall. I guess that's a win. I loved Cole Kmet. One of my biggest. I thought was going to be one of my biggest tight end winners. I'm just shocked that he finished 7th overall. And George Kittle, another player that I really liked, and he was hurt. But man, he brought it on that last half of the year. So if you're some of the, I have a team that has Kittle, and unfortunately didn't make playoffs, so I just got to watch Kittle score a bunch of points in meaningless games that didn't matter. But for me, at least fantasy-wise, so maybe it was a little too early of a buy for me. Another one, Darnell Mooney. Justin Fields just didn't perform. All he did was run, and so just a lost season for Darnell Mooney, and then got hurt. Somebody that was actually a little bit down on a 22 season was actually Joe Burrow. And the reason for it was I didn't think the touchdowns would come. But it didn't really matter. I mean, Jamar Chase got hurt. Didn't really matter. T. Higgins got hurt. Didn't really matter. Tyler Boyd got hurt. I mean, it just like the offense got hurt. But I don't know if this is just the lack of there being, like, I mean, if you are outside of being a top 4 quarterback, the quarterbacks actually were a little bit rough this year. I mean, look at Herbert. Herbert had a bad year. I mean, even Brady, who's been up there, had a bad year. Rodgers had a horrible year. So really, you had Mahomes, Allen, Hurts. I think that's all I can remember off the top of my head. That Mahomes, Allen, Hurts. Yeah, you had those like 3 quarterbacks, but then you even had Lamar and Dak and stuff that are just like, and Burrow was the top end of that grouping. But it seemed like Burrow was the top end of the second tier. He wasn't going to score you the massive points that Hurts and Allen and Mahomes were going to do. But Burrow had a really good season so far. And so somebody that I thought was going to take a little bit of a downfall just for a season. I didn't have him ranked lower in Dynasty at all. But I just thought, hey, like, I think that you had a historical season. And based off of 2 games being Baltimore, one of them that led up like 500 yards and 6 touchdowns or whatever the heck that was. I'm going to put caution to the wind. And he actually started off really rough this season. I was like, hey, my thing is actually coming true. But then he turned it around. All right. So, again, this is Marcus Dynasty for Dads. Peace out. We'll see you again soon. Take care.